Welcome to the Galactic Core Podcast. Here to review the latest films and TV shows from all your favorite intergalactic universes. Now, it's time to get your geek on. Please welcome your host, the prophesized chosen one. It's Andy.
Hello and welcome back to the Galactic Core Podcast. My name is Andy and I'm your host. As each episode I go through the worlds of Star Wars, Marvel, DC, anything else nerdy and geeky in between that takes my fancy, whether it's TV shows, films, just general news. And today, again, something a little bit different, but part 2 of something I've already done. So previously I did an episode on the greatest on-screen heroes of all time. Today I'm going to be talking about the greatest on-screen villains of all time. But first of all, if this is the first time that you're joining me, please give us a like, a follow, and subscribe. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube, where you'll find all my episodes uploaded on there. So yeah, give us a like, give us that follow, give us a review. Let me know what you think about the episode. And obviously let me know if there's anything that you want me to chat about in the future, or if there's any guests from any other podcasts or anything like that that you think would be really good to get on. I would love to hear from you and let me know what you're thinking. So what I'm going to be covering in this episode, as I said, is going to be the greatest on-screen villains of all time. So I've got a personal list. And then I've got a research list. So I polled friends, family, other podcasters, followers and listeners of the show. I put it out on my social medias. So I've compiled a list. My personal list is a top 4. And to be fair, the research list is a top 3, simply because there were so many others that were tied for like the 4th spot that obviously it was impossible to differentiate, because the poll says what the poll says. So we've got a top 3 on that one, but a top 4 of my own personals, which is what I'm going to be going through first of all. So this is going to be in ascending order of 4 to 1. And I'm really excited to give you this list, because anyone that knows me knows that I tend to love the anti-heroes and the villains the most. I mean, I've got a Punisher t-shirt on today. Punisher, one of my greatest for my favourite heroes / anti-heroes. But, the villains, does not everyone love a good villain? Do we not love to see a villain succeed, really? There are not enough films where the villain wins at the end of the day. That's what I find anyway. And I really want to see more films out there where the villain really does kick ass and you're left at the end of it decimated in a way. Similar to Thanos in Infinity War, when at the end of that he does the snap, everyone disappears, and you're left going, wow, did not really expect it to end necessarily on that note. And that's what I want from a good villain film. So I'm going to run through my personal top 4 on-screen villains of all time. So in 4th place, a bit of a one out there that I don't think anyone would expect, but 4th place on my list goes to the Reverse Flash. Now, this is from the CW TV series. A lot of people might be thinking, why? Why on earth would you have this particular character on your list? Anyone that's watched this show, it goes up and down in quality for sure overall, but one consistent good thing about the show is the Reverse Flash, especially season 1. The double bluff of Earbud Thorne being Harrison Wells, the way that it's worked up the tension through the season, the way that he's the one training the Flash, and then the team work it out and they have their sort of showdowns at the end with Firestorm and Arrow joining in. The whole manipulation to me is fantastic. And then what we see of him throughout the rest of the series, I absolutely love this character. I really hope that we're going to get him in the new DCU. With James Gunn fronting all that. I was really disappointed we didn't get Reverse Flash in the Flashpoint film. I mean, it's Flashpoint. It's part of the story involves Reverse Flash. I don't know how we didn't end up getting him, but for me, the Reverse Flash is obviously a very, very intelligent person. Eobard Thawne is very, very clever. He's very manipulative, the way that he works everything around. He's always one of those people that are one step ahead of everyone else. So to me, he is a perfect person to have on this list. So this, my list does cover TV shows and films. It's not just films. And I would struggle to think of anyone that I think I would rather have on this list. If you haven't watched The Flash, he is a reason alone to go and give it a watch. But yeah, just the way he manipulates Barry, the way that he always gets him. I don't always like, obviously they've done it for the TV show, how, the Flash always does get the better of him. Sometimes not in the best way or the way that befits someone like the Reverse Flash, but either way, especially season 1 is part of the reason why I give him a spot on my Mount Rushmore, let's say, of on-screen villains. So number 4 goes to the Reverse Flash. So moving on to the number 3 spot, my on-screen villains, goes to Thanos. There was years and years of building up to him being the big bad. Little glimpses of him here and there in post-credit scenes and Guardians of the Galaxy. And then boom, we get the full-on whack of him in Infinity War. And Infinity War alone almost secures him a place on this list. I just don't know what else there is to really say about the guy in terms of he annihilates the crap out of everyone, He's able to take people on his own. Yes, he's got the gauntlet and he's got different amounts of the Infinity Stones at different points, but surely this dude is worthy of being on this list. So for everything that he does, and even going into Endgame, I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of how they did Thanos at Endgame in terms of the one that we had building up to this gets killed very easily, and then the one that we get is a past alternate timeline Thanos in a way, from like 2014 or whatever it is. But the guy is still badass. He still kicks ass, and it took how many Avengers essentially to be able to stop him and his army. So Thanos, I think, is a worthy inclusion on this list. I don't think many people would necessarily disagree with that. So number 2 on my list, and we are into a Star Wars top 2 now. Maybe not a surprise for anyone that does know me. But I think both of these people were probably predictable, but at the same time completely worthy. So number 2 on my on-screen villains list goes to Emperor Palpatine / Darth Sidious / Chancellor Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, whatever you want to call him. Palpatine hits that number 2 spot. This guy is an absolute fucking mastermind. He is the literal definition of when people use the phrase, he was playing chess while they were playing checkers. He was able to see so far ahead and plan out so well and manipulate everything around him to the point that the Jedi had no clue and they became so complacent that he was able to wipe them out almost. Literally a handful survive. This dude was so far ahead of everyone else, definitely up there as one of the strongest Sith of all time. There is no one else that deserves a greater place on this list than Palpatine. So, and that rolls us into the number 1 spot for who is my personal greatest on-screen villain of all time. I told you it was going to be a Star Wars character. It's probably incredibly predictable. It is this guy, Darth Vader himself. Anyone that listens to my show knows how much I love this guy. You can see behind me the amount of Anakin and Vader stuff that is on display. There is a reason that I love this guy, and that is that he is genuinely one of the best on-screen villains of all time. Going back to the original trilogy, he was absolutely fantastic. The on-screen presence that he has, the voice that James Earl Jones gives him, it just adds everything to it, and he is definitely a worthy inclusion for that number 1 spot. So just to recap, my personal top 4 on-screen villains of all time. Number 4, Reverse Flash. Number 3, Thanos. Number 2, Palpatine. And number 1, Darth Vader. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on my own personal choice, whether you love it, hate it, think there's anyone else that I've left out that should be a worthy inclusion. But, again, that's just my own personal choices. There is a little bit of a difference from the polled list that I'm going to be talking through. But let's, before I get to revealing those top 3 on-screen villains of all time, as judged by my friends, family, listeners, followers, social media people, fellow podcasters, let's just have a bit of a run through of some of the honourable mentions. As I said, when I did the heroes, there was the top 4. This time it's only top 3, so I'm going to run through some of the people that essentially were all voted into 4th place, but because they were all joint votes, I couldn't give it to one particular person. So Darth Maul's in there, Gus Fring's in there, Thanos is in there as well, and Khan from Star Trek is in there. So Maul, a fantastic guy. I think without the Clone Wars, this guy wouldn't be up there at all. But with the Clone Wars and Rebels added on to that, I think you can make a case for him being a fantastic villain. Greatest of all time? I'm not 100% sure I would have him that high up on my own personal list. But as voted for by everyone else, Maul makes that list. Gus Fring, I don't know a huge amount of him, to be fair. I believe Breaking Bad is the show that he's from. I have to admit, I've only half watched Breaking Bad. Haven't watched it all the way through. It just didn't captivate me enough, so maybe I need to go back and rewatch it, to be fair. Please don't hate me for not having watched it. But Gus Fring makes it in there. Thanos, we've already talked about, a worthy inclusion on anyone's list, whether that be a top 3 or top 4. Set number 3 on mine. Joint 4th on this particular one. Definitely no reason why he should not be pushing up near the top, for sure. And then Khan from Star Trek. An interesting choice. So he actually got a couple of votes, to get himself into that position, which is not what I was expecting. So, and I guess it depends which version you refer to as well. Is it the old original trilogy version, or was it the newer version that was played by Benedict Cumberbatch? Whichever one you prefer, he does make a tremendous villain. He's a worthy adversary, I should say, of the Enterprise crew. So I think there's definitely others that could be included in a 4th spot that haven't made it up there. There just some mentions of other people that didn't quite make anywhere near those top 4, but were still voted for. Harley Quinn was in there. Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was in there, to be fair. The Grinch, amazingly, got a vote, just the one vote. I'm not sure if you really consider him to be a villain or not, but amazingly, he got a vote in there. So some, and the Master from Doctor Who got a vote as well. So just some of the others that got mentioned but didn't quite make it up there. But there were 3 that stood out above the rest. 3 that all of you out there that voted for this deemed the greatest on-screen villains of all time. So, 3rd place, all-time greatest on-screen villains, does go to Palpatine. Now, I've already just mentioned him. This guy is so fantastic. He's brutal. He is manipulative. He is calculating down to a T. This guy planned the demise of the Jedi Order and how he was going to take over the galaxy for decades and decades. And then he may have only managed to keep hold of power for a short period of time, but this guy did it in such a way that, is essentially just brutal. That's what makes him such a great villain, that he would sacrifice anyone and everything. He didn't care about putting anyone in their place if he needed to. A worthy inclusion for number 3 on this list, for sure. Number 2 and number 1. Now, this is an interesting one because out of all the votes that I was given for this particular thing, these 2 ended up joint top. They had the same amount of votes. There was no splitting them. Even when I asked a few people, are you sure you want to go down this route? Are you sure that you want to put this together? And in terms of, do you want to change from anyone that you've got? Just to try and separate them out. Unfortunately, there was no separating them. So, number 1 and number 2 on this list. I'll give you the first one. It's Darth Vader. I've already mentioned him as part of my list. He was number 1 by a long shot on my list. The guy, as I've already mentioned, had that on-screen presence in the original trilogy that was just absolutely fantastic. There was no stopping him. He would just do whatever he wanted. He was so menacing. It's almost a shock in a way to see that he had a master himself and that he had to bow before someone else and serve them. But in the end, he has a redemption arc that is worthy of such a bad guy as well. You either excuse me, the fact that he does have a redemption arc, does that add or take away from his villainous status? I'm not really sure. Sometimes I like a villain to be a villain. I want them to die a villain. Not in a cheesy kind of way, but sometimes the redemption arc is too easy. But he had one of the original redemption arcs, I guess. And the fact that he was at different points willing to kill his own son for the Emperor just shows the loyalty and the brutality that he had. And we see it throughout his time now as Vader in different projects that we've seen, the Kenobi series, Rogue One. Even if you've read some of the comics, if you haven't, you really should. It just shows some of the more brutal side of Vader. That this guy, once he fully embraced who he was in the dark side for those years, he was unstoppable. And he had he was right. It was right that he was feared. There's absolutely no putting any sort of downer on that one, to be fair. So, but number one, obviously joint first, as I said, one that I fully expected to get votes, because I've seen it up there on other people's lists, is the Joker, Batman's most famous villain. We've had many iterations of the Joker over the years. He's not always been the most serious of villains I've found. In the comics, yes. On screen, no. They always sort of played up to the Joker almost literally. And I suppose it's maybe some of the older, almost campier versions of him in a way that made me not give him a vote. People will always say Heath Ledger's Joker was probably the greatest on-screen Joker that we've ever had. I'm not going to lie, I find that particular version of the Joker slightly overrated. I find him a bit too much in terms of the way that he goes about things. But I do believe he is a worthy inclusion on a top 4 or top 5 list of on-screen villains. He's always willing to do what is necessary. He is obviously a bit mad, a bit crazy, but there is definitely a worthy inclusion on here to any particular list of why he's up there. I mean, you can all tell me, what's your favourite version of the Joker? There's so many to choose from, to be fair. You had the Joker from Michael Keaton's Batman films, played by Jack Nicholson. Not necessarily my favourite version either. We had the more recent Joaquin Phoenix version of the Joker. A slightly different take, perhaps, on the character. And obviously we've got the Joker 2 that's going to be coming out soon with himself and Lady Gaga in this film, playing Harley Quinn, I believe. So it's going to be an interesting film, I think. And obviously a few other versions that we've seen over the years. Who is your favourite? Is it Heath Ledger's Joker? Does that one really deserve the high praise that it got? But there is no doubt to me that he deserves to be on this particular list. There is one name that, during my research for this list, I watched a few other videos, read articles, just to see who else would appear on such a list and if I thought it was worthy of inclusion for me. There is one name that appeared quite a bit, to be fair, that to me shouldn't have been anywhere near the list. And interestingly, in my own research with all the people, as I said, the followers and listeners of the show, fellow podcasters, friends, family, etc., this guy did not get one vote either. So either people were just, in the articles and the other videos I watched, were just naming this guy for the sake of it, or they love that particular franchise maybe a bit more than I do, or they were just putting him in there because they thought he should be. But this person was Voldemort from the Harry Potter series. I don't know what this guy's doing on a list of greatest on-screen villains of all time. Is he really? Does he really deserve a place on such a list? To me, not even close. I wouldn't even put him in my top 10. The build-up to this guy through so many films and the occasions that you see him. Is he a bit scary at times? I guess so. Is he who shall not be named is there to instill fear in a way. But to me, it just doesn't come across as being scary or menacing or worthy of being one of the greatest on-screen villains of all time. It was just interesting to me that in the research I did, I kept seeing his name pop up, and people were putting him on their personal Mount Rushmore of like on-screen villains. But in my research, no one thought so. Didn't deserve a place on the list. What was the point in having him? So, but that's it, to be fair. It was just a really quick episode. I just wanted to get it out there in terms of letting you know what my personal thoughts were, who should appear on the list, and who did appear on the list in terms of, the votes from everyone that I had. So just to recap, on my personal top 4 list, I had Reverse Flash, Thanos, Palpatine, and Vader. And then you, the listeners, and my fellow podcasters, everything that you had, all the votes I got from yourselves, we had Palpatine, Vader, and Joker sit as the top 3 greatest on-screen villains of all time. Let me know if you agree with it, if you disagree with it. Is there anyone that I haven't mentioned that you think really does deserve a place on that list? Obviously, for the most part, I have only been talking about the franchises like Star Wars, DC, Marvel, fantasy, anything like that. So, do you think that there's anyone that I've missed out that should appear on this list? There's no one I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, does perhaps Sauron from Lord of the Rings deserve a place on there from the original trilogy of films? I'm not necessarily sure that he did either, but interestingly, he got no votes. I've seen him on a few people's lists, again in my research. But let me know in the comments who you think should be included if they weren't already included, and it would be really good to hear some compelling arguments for why they would appear on there as well. So let me know about that. As I said, really quick episode this week just to get those thoughts out there and complete my circle of greatest heroes and greatest on-screen villains of all time. As I mentioned at the start of the show, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube, where you'll find all my episodes. You can find the podcast, if you prefer to listen, on Spotify, Apple Music, most other places where you can find podcasts, to be fair. So I will be back next week. I have a fantastic episode with a couple of fantastic guests. I'm going to be reviewing the Echo series that came out at the start of January. Going to be having a really good chat about that, so that's going to be something worth listening to as well. I'm going to be chatting a little bit about, obviously, some run-offs from there in terms of Daredevil and things like that, so please do tune in for that. But until next time, I will catch you later. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.